One of the most successful, celebrated authors in the country lives right here in Minnesota. If you walk around the lakes in Minneapolis, there's a good chance you've walked right by her and not even known it. Most people wouldn't recognize Kate DiCamillo, but millions love her work, including me, which is why I was so honored to sit down with her to talk about her extraordinary career, a career she says she might not have had she not moved to Minnesota.
It looks like this inside.
As children browse the shelves at the Red Balloon bookstore in St. Paul, they have no idea one of the most successful children's authors in the world is sitting just a few feet away. Even the author herself can hardly believe it. When you look at that, the career you've had, what do you think?
I think it's impossible. You know, it is truly not comprehensible.
Kate DiCamillo is a New York Times bestseller with more than 43 million books in print. Her work has collected every kind of award, including a nearly unprecedented 2 Newberys. Her books range from a hit children's series about a pig who loves toast to chapter books that became instant classics like Because of Winn-Dixie.
My dog. Come on, boy. Come on, Winn-Dixie.
And The Tale of Despero.
Are you a rat?
No,
A mouse?
I am a gentleman.
DiCamillo's own childhood in Florida influenced all of those stories. Growing up, her battle with chronic pneumonia fueled her love of reading.
I was really a sickly kid, missed a ton of school. So I was home alone a lot, and I had books, and that was fantastic.
In college, a compliment from a professor on her writing and a suggestion she go to grad school set her on her path.
So I thought, why bother with graduate school? I'll just go be a writer. Yeah.
And then you spent a decade?
Working, at Circus World, Disney World, telling everybody I was a writer.
What did you think that meant in your 20s, or how did...
What did I think it meant? I thought it meant wearing a black turtleneck and being, cool.
She didn't actually start writing until she turned 30 and moved to Minnesota.
I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I hadn't moved from Florida to Minnesota and gotten a job in a book warehouse.
By sheer chance, DiCamillo was assigned to the children's section.
And I started to read some of those books, and I thought, I want to try and do something like this.
So she started setting her alarm for 4:30 every morning and committed to writing 2 pages a day every day before work.
And in a little bit of time, you have the story, you send the story out into the world. What do you get back? And like if you're standing in front of a group of kids, the answer is always money. It's like, no, that's not it. What you get is a rejection letter. Do you want to guess how many rejection letters I got? 5? 12? 50? 473.
What?
Yeah. I always say to them, I look at that number, 473, and I think, what if I'd stopped at 471? I have to figure out how to do that.
After 6 years of rejection, a publisher finally pulled this book out of a pile about a girl and her dog that DiCamillo wrote during her second winter here in Minnesota.
I was homesick, and Because of Winn-Dixie is a book about homesickness in many ways, and it's a book about missing the South, and so it's, it's like, I couldn't have written it unless I left.
DiCamillo hoped the book would sell 5,000 copies, but then it won a Newbery honor and went on to sell 11 million.
It totally changed my life, and things started to happen. And
She
I remember
quit the
saying to
warehouse
my best
job,
friend that
bought
I
a
felt
house
like
in Minneapolis, and started writing full-time. She still writes out of her home office, still before dawn, 2 pages a day, 5 days a week. But the homesickness of her early days, in fact, her very definition of home, has changed.
Also, I found I love winter, and winter is very conducive to telling stories, and all the seasons really move me too, and so all of that, it was just like this massive gift, and I had this feeling of, here I am where I am supposed to be.
And you've never left. You could go anywhere. You could write anywhere. You've had lots of success.
No, this is home. This is my place. Yeah.
DeCamillo has 2 more books coming out this fall, when she'll also celebrate the 20th anniversary of my personal favorite, The Tale of Despereaux. If you'd like to hear more of our conversation, we have linked the entire interview here. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
When you look at that, the career you've had, what do you think?
I think it's impossible. You know, it is truly not comprehensible. And as soon as you started to, because you gave me fair warning that you were going to embarrass me, I just kind of like la 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 la. I mean, like I can't. It's not comprehensible, you know. And it sounds disingenuous to say that, you know, but it's true, you know, that there's still a part of me that like thinks, oh boy, maybe I can get published someday, you know, because it just, and you having done all your research probably know that, you know, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you if I hadn't moved from Florida to Minnesota and gotten a job in a book warehouse down in the warehouse district called the Bookman. And I was a picker. I pulled the books off the shelves and filled the orders. And I ended up on the 3rd floor, which was all children's books. And I'd already knew that I wanted to write and had started to like do the daily work of writing by the time I had that job, but I didn't think that I wanted to write kids' books. And I started to read some of those books, and I thought, I want to try and do something like this. And so here's like a really long answer. It's just like, but being there, watching the whole business of how many books do we serve the whole upper Midwest. Mm-hmm. I got very realistic expectations for what would happen. And the grand goal was to sell when Winn-Dixie, because Winn-Dixie sold, was like, if I'm really lucky, from what I could see, how the whole system operated, I'll sell something like 5,000 copies, which will earn out the advance and then put me in a place where I can do, you know, get to publish another book. And maybe at some point I can go down to working 30 hours a week. And, you know, so that was, there's still so much of me that is there doing those calculations that to hear, you know, what you just said, it doesn't even compute, you know.
5,000, 40 million.
Right? It's just like, so what do you do with that? And you know, I think about, this was like a long time ago, when kind of like, because Winn-Dixie was a book that people would share with people, and it like, it totally changed my life, and things started to happen. And I remember saying to my best friend that I grew up with, I'm so overwhelmed by all of this. I don't know. And she's like, it's not about you, pumpkin. And that has been a really good sentence to repeat to myself again and again as I do all of this. It's not about me. I get to be a part of it, but it's not about me.
So what's it about?
It's about what we were talking about before the camera started to roll. It's about you doing read aloud with your kids on either side of you. That's what it's about. And I get to be a part of that, but that's what it's about. You know, that really, truly profound, life-saving connection through story, and what story can do, and what reading aloud can do, and how, you know, a book can save your life, literally.
So you mentioned that this wouldn't have happened if you hadn't moved from Florida to Minnesota. How did Minnesota play a role in your career?
Well, because Winn-Dixie is like, I mean, I thought, how cold can it get? is what I thought. It gets cold in Florida, and you run from one place to another. You know, it's just like I just
Still in your shorts.
right,
Just quick sprint
right.
instead
You
of
just
a
like
leisurely
it's like,
stroll.
and so I wasn't. You know, I was homesick, and because of Winn-Dixie is a book about homesickness in many ways, and it's a book about missing the South, and so it's it's like I couldn't have written it unless I left, and also it's a book about not having a dog, which was the other thing that happened, when I moved here. It was the first time without a dog, and so I made up the best dog that I could think of. But the other thing is, the bookman has to come into play there. If I hadn't ended up at that warehouse on that floor, and then also, Minnesota in general is like, I couldn't believe it when I moved here. I kept on saying to my best friend, she's like, I don't want to hear it anymore, but it's just like, I had a bookstore or a library in every direction within a 10-minute walk, whichever direction I went. Uptown, Odegaard's, Borders was there, Majors and Quinn. I mean, it was just like, so it's a very literate place. And then before I published Winn-Dixie, I got a Loft McKnight, where they just hand you a pile of cash with no strings attached and say, we don't know you, but we believe in what you're doing. And so it's a very supportive community for the arts.
And so what did the long, cold winter have to do with it?
Well, wow. One, and we started off talking about clogs. And I remember my roommate when I went out, and it was the first time it had snowed, and she's like, you don't want to wear the clogs in that. It's like, how? Again, it can't be that. And I saw that clog again in spring. It's like, there it is, yeah. So it's the shock of that weather, but also I found, and this is like astonishing, I love winter. And winter is very conducive to telling stories. And so and all the seasons really move me too, And so all of that, it was just like this massive gift, and I had this feeling of, here I am where I am supposed to be,
And you've never left. You could go anywhere. You could write anywhere. You've had lots of success.
No, this is home. This is my place. Yeah.
So you are a very big deal in the children's, just as an author and specifically in that space. But I think it's interesting that a lot of Minnesotans would have no idea that you call Minnesota home.
I guess you're trying to take care of that. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, it is why I thought, and also I know you're incredibly busy and you have a lot of demands on your time, but I thought, I was kind of surprised you agreed to sit down, because I thought maybe that's one of the reasons you didn't want to sit down for an interview. Do you enjoy the fact that you could walk into this store, you've got a table full of books, you could fill shelves, and people wouldn't know who you are?
Sure, and I'm always surprised when they do know who I am. And it happens.
You like flying under the radar a little bit?
I do, because I think, again, it's not about me, Pumpkin, and it's also, there's that kind of disbelief a little bit too. But there are people who do recognize me. I'm always surprised. And then I'm always grateful when it happens, because they tell me incredible stories, that I wouldn't know about otherwise, and that really mattered during the pandemic. When you're sitting at a signing table, you get those stories, but to connect with people when I wasn't seeing them all the time, it mattered for people to tell me their stories. So
I think one of the reasons your books connect so deeply with people, one, the writing is just beautiful, and the way you can hook people into the story. Like, I love in Despero where you'll address the reader all of a sudden.
Oh, that was so much fun to do.
It's so fun to read. It's
And an
just
act
delightful.
of desperation on my part, because it's like I had no idea what I was doing when I was writing that. And that voice showed up, that kind of smart alecky voice. And I thought, this voice knows what's going on. So I just kind of like plugged into that voice, and it was a comfort to me to have that voice, you know.
Well, but you aren't afraid to talk about heavy topics in children's books.
Right, and you know what I get, there are still people who will say, why do you want to write about such dark things? Or I don't want my kids to know about this or that, or it's, you know,
Grief
it's,
or
yeah,
loneliness.
yeah.
Or...
And I'm, you know, I've pushed back about that a little bit in two ways. One, yes, those things are in the book, but there's more love and light. And two, you know, the world is a difficult place, and if you think a kid doesn't know that, guess again. You know, and not only do kids experience it, they're human beings, they experience it the same way we do, but it's really kind of maddening to have somebody tell you that what you see in front of you is not going on, you know? And so books are a way to make you feel seen. It's like, yeah, I feel that way. It's hard. And yeah, I feel that way. I've been loved, you know?
Oh, beautifully put. And I know when you were talking with Jenna Bush on the Today Show, you were mentioning that your dad being absent from your life, while that was so hard, it's helped you be the writer that you are.
Absolutely. It was like, it used to be when I would do school visits and I had a PowerPoint and I would talk about my dad. I talked about being sick all the time as a kid. I was really, really a sickly kid, missed a ton of school. And then I would talk about the fact that my dad left the family when I was 6. And depending on the group of kids and depending on, you know, what kind of life experiences they had, a lot of them would make the connections themselves before I even got to kind of like pointing it out. I get to do this because these things which seem so bad actually gave me something, you know, and it's a really moving experience to stand in front of kids and have them see that, you know.
And what would you say it gave you?
Well, being sick all the time, which is actually like that runs through a lot of writers' biographies, you learn to rely on your head. And, you know, my mother and my father were in agreement on one thing, which was they didn't like TV. So I was home alone a lot and I had books, and that was fantastic. And would I be who I am without that? I don't know. And then, you know, with my dad, you know, when a parent leaves, kids, it particularly when I was growing up, it didn't get talked about, you know. It's just like this happened, and, you know, and so it was this thing that I was always turning over. It was an emptiness, and I wrote into that emptiness. I know what it's like to feel that way. And that, you know, that heartbreak, which is something I've always carried around in me, ends up on the page. And it ends up on the page along with that power and promise of connection, which I've experienced by all the people who have welcomed me in and loved me, fed me, read to me, you know.
And to have a young reader somewhere that's feeling that and couldn't articulate it, see it articulated beautifully in a book.
And to feel it, hopefully they feel it. And then what the feeling that you get is like, oh, okay, I'm not broken and I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think we underestimate in this day and age the power of books and storytelling with all the competition we're getting with social media, internet, streaming?
I don't, you know, I hear so much from readers and from teachers who are reading that I believe that there are so many kids who are readers and so many teachers and librarians and booksellers who believe in the power of books that I'm not, I know that sounds naive, I'm not worried. I think that I just wish that there was a way to get more books into more kids' hands, you know, that, but it's just like, it's that thing of, I feel like it can save a kid's life, you know.
When you work very hard personally to help with those causes, to go speak at schools, are you speaking around in Minneapolis, Minnesota schools a lot, or how do you balance that? And I'm sure you get requests all the time.
Yeah, and I, you know, even before the pandemic, there was just too much. I had stopped with the school visits we weren't doing.
Yeah.
There was just too
Well, and once
too
word
much.
gets out, Kate
Yeah.
Camilla came and spoke to my class.
Right,
It's like everyone's
right.
going,
No, and so that, and I got to do, you know, some virtual stuff, which actually turns out to be very moving, you know, particularly if the kid shows up right in the, you know, right here, and when they come up to the front of the class to ask their question. But yeah, there hasn't been time for all of that, you know.
But one I loved, and they had the video on the Today Show story, you talking with a group of kids about how many rejection letters you got.
Oh yeah, it's so that's so much fun to do. That was part of the PowerPoint. Is like, okay, so you know, I'll do it very briefly. Okay, I finally make up my mind that I want to write, right? Which we won't even get into how long that took and how confused I was about, you know, the fact that I would have to write in order to be a writer. We'll just skip over all that. And so okay, so I say to the kids, you're writing. You know, for me, I'm doing the 2 pages a day, and in a little bit of time, you have the story, you send the story out into the world. What do you get back? And like, if you're standing in front of a group of kids, the answer is always money. It's like, no, that's not it. What you get is a rejection letter. And then I ask them if they know what a rejection letter is, and some of them do, and we talk about rejection letters, and then I say, okay, so how many rejection letters do you think I got? And I have literally done this all over the world. I've stood up there and had them guess. No kids, they'll start at 5. And you know, if things get really rowdy, somebody might call out 50 or 100 laughing, you know, and it's like, nope. And then I put the number up on the screen, and there's like this, and then like crickets, you know. So and it's like, I always say to them, you know, I look at that number 473 and I think, what if I'd stopped at 471? Wouldn't be standing here talking to you today. Wouldn't be this person who has found what she wants to do with her life and gets to do it, you know.
Yeah, and I love that just because you're good at something, because you're clearly good at it, and you had to have known that somewhere inside of you to keep sending those letters off at 471, 472.
Yeah, you know, I don't know that I'd like to push back on that. Let's argue. What it was for me, I think, is that, you know, because I had that long period of time through my 20s where I wanted to do it and wasn't doing it. And so by the time I sat down and started doing the work of it, what I saw so clearly, and you know, I was going to writing groups, and is it was just entirely up to me. It wasn't, you know, talent was kind of like beside the point. It was like, I could control whether or not I could do the work, and whether I sent the work out into the world, and I could be relentless about that. That was within my control. But the rest of it wasn't. I don't, you know, talent, none of that was within my control. I wanted to do the work, and I could do the work, and so I did the work, you know.
And then to have your first book get a Newbery.
Newbery Honor. Yeah.
But
no.
it meant it was going to have the seal
Oh,
on
the
the
seal.
cover.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was
no.
that like for you?
Oh.
473 rejection letters, and then bam.
Right. And I was living in a little apartment on Lake Harriet. It was, I actually don't know the square footage. I would guess it was maybe 400 and something square feet. And I remember talking to Mary Ann Grossman from Pioneer Press the morning that happened. And she said, "Are you going to quit your job?" And I said, "No, why would I quit my job?" She said, "Are you going to buy a house?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to buy a house." And like within, 6 months, I had done all of that. It's like,
You're like, oh, you might have known something.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Because what does that seal mean for an author?
there is nothing like the Newbery. Nothing. I mean, there are lots and lots of literary awards, but the Newbery is something that the general public knows, and it's something that I knew. I remember being at the little library where I grew up, the Cooper Memorial Public Library in Claremont, Florida. There was a spin rack of yearling Newbery titles, paperbacks, and I knew what that was. I knew what it meant, and I knew that it meant that I was gonna, that the book was something that I wanted to read. I was 8 years old, and I knew that. So I mean, it is, and not only that, not only everybody kind of knowing it, but it means that the book will stay in print. I'll be long gone, and if I'm, that award will let the superhero squirrel who writes poetry and the mouse who goes down into the dungeon, they'll still get to be here. Yeah.
That's got to be kind of mind-blowing to think about. It will.
Again, we don't
think
there.
about
Yeah. That's not true. Yeah.
So I know where your love of stories and reading came from, and I've read about how in your 20s you said, "I'm a writer." What did you think that meant in your 20s, or how did that?
What did I think it meant? I thought it meant wearing a black turtleneck and being, cool. And that's what I thought it meant. I mean, I loved to read. I was a huge reader, and the whole plan, if it was a plan, solidified in college when I had a professor who said, this is in the PowerPoint to the kids too, it's a direct quote, "You have a certain facility with words. You should consider graduate school." And because I was 20, I thought, he's speaking to me in a clever code. He's telling me I'm super, super talented.
Wasn't wrong.
Yeah, I know. But that's not what he meant. But it was just like, so I thought, why bother with graduate school? I'll just go be a writer. Yeah.
And then you spent a decade?
Yeah. Working, at Circus World, Disney World, telling everybody I was a writer. Having my poor mother go to the grocery store in the small town where I grew up. "What's Kate doing?" I don't know.
She's talking about writing.
Yeah. I was always so glad that she was still in Claremont and still going to the grocery store by the time the first book came out, because I think it mattered to her.
Yeah. I would say, well, she's a writer, just like we said she would be. You're going to love her book. So I think a lot of people would think when you look at your career, the thing that gives you the most maybe fulfillment is to see that you won Newberys, you're a New York Times bestseller. But when you enjoy your career the most, or when you're the most fulfilled, what does that look like? What are you focusing on? That's a very poorly worded question. But
It's not a poorly worded question. I get what you're after, and it's like, writing is hard for me, There's still that part of me, I do it as soon as I get up in the morning before I can talk myself out of doing it. All of which is to say that the great thrill of it is not, there. Every once in a while there is like this, a good day where the story comes together and I feel like I'm getting at something that really matters to me and that is like bigger than me, and those are good days. But probably it's that thing of being able to connect with readers. It's a kid that comes through the line who says, I made my mom read this book, because I liked it so much, and here's my mom. Or it's the I cry so much in signing lines these days, but there's there are the 30-year-old fourth grade teachers who come through and say casually, I read Because of Winn-Dixie to my class all the time, and I remember my fourth grade teacher reading it to me. And it's just like those things just knock me sideways. I mean, or, people who come through the line who got married using words from Despereaux or words from Flora and Ulysses, and it's those things, to be connected to people, to be a part of things, that's the biggest thrill. Those are the things that just undo me.
So Minnesota's going to be home? You're going to stay in Minnesota?
Oh, yeah.
Why stay in Minnesota? What role does it play in your whole writing
Well,
life?
One, I'll say it, I love winter. And everybody was running around going, all this snow, and it's like, oh, this is great. It's like, I've been working on fairy tales. If there's a better time to write a fairy tale than when it's snowing, I don't know when it is. I love it. I love the sensibility. I have a wide, loving network of friends here that has become family, and Minnesota is just it's home. I would never think about leaving.
And did you think that when you moved here, like, I'm probably going to stay, this is it?
I remember that the second winter thinking, I don't know if I've got what it takes. But then once I got my sea legs, I've never thought about,
Which winter was it that you wrote Winn-Dixie? Was it your first winter here?
It was the second winter.
It was that winter.
Yeah, and that
so
was...
that's when you were really questioning things. And
that
thinking,
was
it's
rough.
sunny in Florida right now.
Yeah, right. And that was the peak of the homesickness, and that was when I thought, can I do it?
But instead you escaped into a different
writing.
world.
Yeah, again, and that goes back to the, we wouldn't be talking if I hadn't, I don't know. I guess I probably still would have become a writer at some point, but it would not be the same. It would be, totally different if I hadn't moved here.
What do you want kids to know? This is going to air in May or end of April. People gearing up for summer reading. What message would you give to families and kids about diving into some books?
One, the library's there. The library is a miracle. It's free. They have summer programming, and I've never ever had a librarian not, be able to help me or find a book for me. So that's one thing. Two, it is, I grew up in a different time period, but I remember having a tree house in the backyard, and being able to go up there and read for solid blocks of time. It is just it was a real gift. So to let your kids do that, let them disappear into a book, whatever book they want, and it's and also it's a great time to read aloud to each other in the summertime.
Why do you think that's so powerful?
You know, it's one of those things where at some point I'll be able to write an essay that articulates it, and I haven't gotten there yet, but I feel almost like something subterranean happens. It's like you come into a safe place, a third place. Everybody kind of puts down their baggage. So if it's happening in a classroom, which you and I were talking about how we both experienced it when we were kids in second grade, it's just like everybody just kind of relaxes and they embody the story all together. And that's including the person that's reading. And I you know, it's like it's such a gift to be able to read to somebody. To be read to is great. To be able to read to somebody is such a gift, because you feel those tendrils of connection happening. And that thing too where we were talking about, like, you know, things happen that we as adults we don't have language for. And surely as kids that you don't have language for, and a story gives us the language for those bigger things, you know. And we're not talking about it directly, we're talking about it indirectly, which makes it safer, I think, you know.
Well, you would be forgiven if you never wrote again. 40 million books in print, all those movies, a play, an opera, all of it. Do you think there will ever be a time that you put down the pen?
Gosh, I hope not. It's like when you and I were talking about the Newbery speech for Flora and Ulysses. It's the thing of being able to get at something that I don't even fully understand. That's the great gift of writing for me, is it pulls up those things and synthesizes them for me in a way that I need. So I hope I'm never without it.
So lucky us, we get more books. Sounds like.
I hope. Well, there's a lot more coming.